Welcome to another discovery journey beyond perception. My name is Simon, and today we all have the privilege of having a true visionary and pioneer, Dr. Jacob Liberman, here as a guest for the second time. And just to very briefly introduce you again, your career spans over 4 decades. You are a world-renowned optometrist, author, and a leading authority on light, vision, and consciousness. Welcome, Jacob. It's a great pleasure to be here with you again today.
Simon, it's always fun to have a nice conversation with you. It's a good way to start the day for both of us.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I think in our first conversation a couple of months ago, we spoke about your book, Luminous Life, and also we touched on your philosophy for life. Yeah, I think your insights into vision and optics really challenged quite some conventional ideas about how we see the world. And right. I love as a start, and that's my idea for today, and then we see what we make with that or not. I love to discuss this fascinating interplay between our mind on the one side, on the eyes, but then also the world around us. And possibly, we will be challenging the boundaries of what we perceive as reality. And so I'd love to ask you, what's your take on what's real and what is not? And that's a question which I've been curious about for quite some years now, and it led to all kinds of unexpected realizations. And those realizations were very different to what I perceived the world or the thing or myself to be. Realizations literally beyond my current understanding, beyond my perception. And that's also where the name of this format came from. So what's your perspective on what's real?
So what I hear you asking is, how does someone know truth from belief? Everyone says, oh, I believe this, or you need to change your belief. So what is belief? Belief is what you think is going on. I think means I don't know. The word belief means the opposite of the word truth. Let me repeat that. Belief means the opposite of truth. So then it seems like the world is running on beliefs. When I was a small boy, most people agreed about most things. If you turned on the television when the television was first created, there was one person that would provide you the news. That person wasn't giving you their opinion. The news was determined by what happened, where did it happen, who was involved, and so on. It was merely a reporting of what occurred, a reporting of what is. So you can say truth is what is, and belief is what you think is. Very, very different things. You mentioned the mind. The mind is a tool of duality. When you examine the mind provides something called point of view. It gives you a point of view. You have a certain point of view, someone else has a different point of view. But a point of view is just what it says, a point of view. It's not the whole picture. It's just a point of view. So the moment you speak about a point of view, you're speaking about a minuscule aspect of what is. If I had a point of view of an elephant and it was in the back of the elephant, I might think that the elephant was the part called the tail. But it's only when you step back and the point of view dissolves that one has an experience of something that has nothing to do with anything they've ever thought. So let's talk about the mind and the chatter we hear. We often hear people speak about that the brain has two halves, the right half of the brain we say is very creative and so on. And of course, creation means something that emerges from nothing. So you could say that the right half of the brain sees what occurs from nothingness. You could say that's what is. The left hemisphere of the brain has to do with creating a narrative. It has to do with a story about what the right half has perceived. And the two halves of the brain communicate by a bridge, a connection called the corpus callosum. Many, many years ago, they were trying to find ways of helping people that were having epileptic seizures. And so they did what they call split brain experiments. They would cut the corpus callosum, and they were able to reduce the seizures, but then it gave them an opportunity in real time to see the different functions of the right half of the brain and the left half of the brain. So if you were one of those people, and we had split the two halves of the brain, and then I said to you, Simon, go out and take a walk, you would get up and you would start walking. If sometime later I would say to you, what were you doing? That requires the right hemisphere to create a story about what you were doing. And the right hemisphere would say, I wanted to go out and get a glass of milk. Well, what's interesting that they discovered is the narrative often had nothing to do with the actual experience. And even when it was related, it was often very inaccurate. So the left hemisphere of the brain creates a story, a narrative. We often hear that voice inside, but that voice is rarely, if ever, correct. But we have been conditioned to trust that voice. We were said, when I was a little boy, the expression you would hear is the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And we were led to believe that my mind, in fact, we called it my mind because it was associated with me. But the mind is not associated with you. It's just a function of the brain creating a narrative, and that narrative is rarely correct. It's rarely accurate. So how do we know that's true? People often say, well, I can change my mind. You're right. It changes when the wind is blowing in many different directions. Then you look at high-level thinking, what we call science. Now, science is a lot more critical than everyday thinking. I don't know how old you are, but if you look at things that were discovered 10 years ago, and they said, this is absolutely the way the brain works, how many of those things are facts today? And so science is a continually changing narrative. And while science is very valuable, you have to understand that science is evaluating something that they say has to do with life, but the scientific experiments are so different than everyday life that it's hard to imagine how it can fit. As an example, let's say that you have your back is hurting you, and you wake up and your back is hurting, and you speak to your friend that morning, and your friend says, gosh, I just saw this wonderful naturopath or chiropractor. They were so nice. And so you call up the office and you go and you find the person is very nice. They take a lot of time with you and they work on you a little bit and they look at you and they say, Simon, you're going to be just fine. And you leave and you feel much better because you know that what you have is not permanent. It's going to get better. And they've told you, and you trust them because you resonated with them. Now, no matter what kind of treatment you receive, if the person providing the treatment and the person receiving it both feel good about it, no matter what the treatment is, about 80% of the time you have a positive result. Whether you hug them, whether you do massage, or whether you do surgery, regardless. Now you look at science. Science says, no, this is not the way you check what something works, because you don't really know what works. So first of all, we have to eliminate that a friend told you to go somewhere. Can't have that. Two, we have to eliminate anything that's personal. So we cannot give you the treatment by someone you can see. You have to be blindfolded. They have what they call control groups. They use something called placebos. Every time you add another mechanism to try to purify the experiment, so there's nothing on it of a personal nature. Every time you do that, you reduce the effectiveness of the treatment. Every time you do that. And if you keep adding controls, you can eventually create an experiment that you get no results. What's fascinating about this is when you look at the science for pharmaceutical agents and even surgeries, you find that most of the time there is not a statistically significant difference between the treatment group and the placebo group. Let me repeat that again. We're looking for the truth, but the way we design the experiments, you cannot tell whether something is working or nothing is working. So then the question is nothing truly nothing? Or is there something going on? Because what causes us to get well is a combination of things that together make up life. How you feel, what's going on in the mind, whether you resonate with another person. So what I'm sharing with you is that truth is very different from belief. And let me give you another example. You are aware of the term mind-body medicine. Essentially, over the last many years, we have discovered, and the reason they call it mind-body medicine or psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology is because the reason psycho or mind is first is because what one believes in and believes is going on has a profound effect on their biology. So what has essentially been discovered in the field of psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology is that our beliefs are translated into our biology. What we think has a big impact upon us, and it can move us one direction or another direction. So then all the people that are into the mind and creating their own reality and making the right choices say, well, we only want what's going to create what I want. Of course, they then discover that that doesn't work either. So one of the pioneers in that field was a wonderful neuroscientist named Candace Pert. She wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion. Candace was a friend of mine and a colleague, and she introduced me to a large degree to this work and was sharing with me that what one believes has a lot to do with the state of their health. In other words, one's point of view has an effect. So if then the world says, well, then we have to change our point of view to change the effect. I came up with something very, very different. What came to me was, well, what happens if there's no point of view? That's a very interesting question. Candace said to me, I never considered that. But let's consider that for a second. In physics, they have an expression. They said, the world changes when God blinks. In other words, when the source of creation isn't looking, everything changes. When you don't have a point of view, it's the same as not looking. Everything changes. Well, what does it change into? Because we say the only constant is change. So what is it changing into? It's changing into the default setting, the original state. The original state usually begins with no problems. Mm-hmm. It's like buying a new car. You get it with a warranty. You will not have any problems for 48,000 miles or 100,000 miles. That's typically what happens with the body. You come in with a warranty. You won't have any problems until you are conditioned with ideas about the world. That's called adulteration. We've adulterated you by telling you what we think is going on. So, as an example, maybe we spoke about this last time, but I don't know, so we'll just go. When you were born, Simon, the doctor, the nurse, whoever delivered you from your mother, they held you up. They made sure your body was doing this, was breathing. So they make sure first you're alive, and then their eyes go down to your genitals and they announce, it's a boy. And your mother then says, we'll call him Simon instead of Susan. And then the father says to your mother, I'll go home and I'll paint the room blue, because blue is for boys and pink is for girls. And I'll buy some nice outfits for a little boy, not a little girl. And that's the way it begins. But, in life, we say things are not black or white. They're shades of gray. Well, what's interesting is the human body sometimes has biologically male genitalia. Sometimes it has female genitalia. Sometimes it has neither. Sometimes it has both. But the person is much more than their biological tools. Genetics plays a huge role in the balance of hormonal distribution and many different aspects of physiology, which then determine how the person experiences themselves. Most females don't experience themselves as males. Most males don't experience themselves as females. However, there is a group that's not black or white, but in between, that has very different experiences. And the experiences are not a choice. It's not a mental thing. It's a genetic thing. It's a genetic predisposition, and not only occurs with humans, but occurs with fish and with birds and with lizards, seahorses, or both. The point I'm making is belief has caused us to look at the world and to say, well, if you're this color skin, you're okay, as long as you have blonde hair. But if you have this color skin and your hair is different, then you have to live somewhere else. If you believe in this God, you're okay. But if you believe in this one, not as good. And so the mind takes a world of oneness, and through the process of conditioning and what you call belief, creates duality. What does duality create? Duality creates every problem we have in the world. Every problem we have in the world. The world is like, we treat the body as a piece of equipment with replaceable parts. But the body is one unit, and it is a microcosm of a macrocosm called the universe. In America, we have an expression: united we stand, divided we fall. Anytime the mind divides a unified world into choice, you end up with problems. And the reason you end up with problems is that neither of the choices are truth, they're belief. So your question, how do you know what the truth is? How do you know what's real and what isn't? What's real is what's called a direct experience. It's not something that is internally generated. It's something that comes to us as a gift. Nobody knows from where. Everyone wants to create a narrative. Oh, it's my channeled whatever. Yeah. Oh, it's the angels. It's Abraham. It's no one knows. These are the narratives of the mind which confuse. They just create confusion. Confusion is a lack of clarity. So when you have confusion, it's difficult to see. When you have confusion, you have stress. When you connect with someone and there is resonance, there's nothing to think about. You merge. That's why in America they say birds of a feather flock together. But when there isn't resonance, there's dissonance. It's like two magnets of opposite poles. You cannot bring them together. They keep pushing apart. Life does exactly that. It merges us with likeness, and it naturally moves us away from things that might be dangerous or foreign to us. And that occurs across species. All species share this sense of knowing. It isn't the person that knows. It's something in the makeup of all living things that knows. We have to notice less of what we're looking for and more of what's looking for us. Let me repeat that again. Our whole idea is that we are looking for something. It doesn't work this way at all. The eyes, in fact, let me make a broad statement. There is nothing within us physiologically designed to initiate action, to start the process, to look for something. Everything that occurs in here is a response to something coming to us, catching our eye. Well, why would something catch your eye? Well, if you look out and you see that this tree creates apples and this one creates bananas, and rain occurs in this part of the world a lot, but in this part of the world, it doesn't occur so much. And this part, they have plants called cactus that require very little water. And this part is a rainforest because things require, well, there is an intelligence there. Now, we have no idea what this intelligence is. We don't understand it. They say we use about 5% of our capacity. They also say we've discovered about 5% of the universe. What does that mean? We do not see very much, but something sees us. And I'm not speaking spiritual talk. What I'm speaking about is that there's an animating force in this universe. I have no idea what the hell it is. You know, it doesn't have a name. I can't imagine it has human form. It's probably formless, but I have no idea what it is. But that, whatever that is, started breathing me the moment I came out of my mother. And at the same instance, it started pumping my heart and it started moving the blood through my vascular system. None of this do we do. All of it does us. That's truth. Everything else, just opinion.
So that includes who we think we are, our personality, our point of view.
Well, think about that. Personality, our personality, comes from the word persona. Persona. Persona means mask. It's what the person is wearing that makes the world believe that they are the mask. Persona is from the Latin word personare, which means to breathe through. The real essence of our humanity is that which is breathing through, not the persona. But conditioning builds a persona. You're male or female, even though your gender identity may not fit that at all. And if it doesn't fit that, you're screwed. Your life is going to be off because you don't fit anywhere. You're not this, and you're not this, and only those things should exist. If you're not that, you're a mess. You know, when I first learned that, you were born in Switzerland. I was born in Germany.
Yeah.
So I was born in Havana, Cuba. I came to the United States in 1955 when I was 7 years old. I was in elementary school. And when I was in 6th grade, there was a boy. Well, he dressed like a boy, sitting next to me. And he was dressed like a boy, but he had blonde hair. It was very thin. His voice was different than any boy, and he walked very differently. Everything about him was different. When you look at him, I don't know what else to call at the time, it was not a boy and it was not a girl. It was some combination of both. It was the first time in my life that I recognized such a person. They were lovely, very nice person, and I had a friendship with them. And I watched over them because the other kids, especially the boys, really were mean to this person. They were really, really, really mean, nasty. And I first realized how cruel one can be because the world does not fit what we think it's supposed to be, and how things are not what we think. Here we think it's only a boy or a girl, and here I meet someone that's neither one or a combination. Who knew back then? I was just 11 or 12 years old. One day we came into class, and just before we came in, the other boys were picking on this person, and I told them to stop. And we went into the class. This person was sitting to my right, and we're listening to the teacher, and I hear something. And I look to the right, and this young person had urinated on his seat, and the urine was coming off the edge of the seat onto the floor. He or she was so upset, so terrified by what had just occurred, they were frozen. I took him by the arm took him to the bathroom, and stayed with him until things calmed down. Now, that wasn't created by a choice in someone's mind. That was a creation of life. The choice is the belief. The truth is what actually is. And, I don't know how it was in Germany when you were born, but in Cuba, everybody lived in the same neighborhood. And my family was getting by working 7 days a week like all the other working people. When I was about 4 years old or 5 years old, I would go up on the roof and I would look onto the street, because the streets had very little cars at the time. So the streets were filled with people walking. You looked down and it was an ocean of people. Every color, every religion, every variety that you could imagine was all there. It was crowded like sardines in a can. But there was never a traffic jam. Everything flowed because everyone just got along. That was the environment I was born in. Because of that, I can honestly say I never had a racist thought. Oh, this one is better because they're white, or this one is black, or this is the right. I never had that. And I've never, to this day, and I'll be 76 in November, I don't even know where to put any of that. So you speak about, how do you know what's real? What's real is what is beyond any point of view. What's real is what is experienced through no point of view. And that which is real is oneness. It's integral, which is the word from where integrity comes. Integrity means truth. Integrity means oneness. And from that word, oneness, also comes health, wholeness, contentment, prosperity, everything that a human being desires when they're praying to God or whatever, it comes free of charge when there's no point of view. So, people who have very little money, and all of a sudden the stock market collapses, nothing has changed in their life. People who have a lot of money and the stock market collapses and nothing works any longer. Who's rich and who's poor? All of our conditioning creates a virtual reality. Virtual reality, something that is not real. We sell you insurance that if you should die, your children or your wife or your partner will receive something. Should be called death insurance. They call it life insurance. They sell you insurance if you get sick. Should called sickness insurance. But they call it health insurance. You see how we use words to say one thing when it means the opposite? That's all conditioning. That's all belief. And all of that together creates a lot of confusion a lot of stress, probably every war on the planet, whether it's a war between countries, a war between two people, or a war within your own mind. Well, I think we covered a couple things there anyway.
My mind still has one question. So if there is a point of view, but from what I know here, what I'm hearing you proposing is that when there's no point of view, things fall into place, and you shared a couple of things: health, wholeness, prosperity, free of charge. So how to get rid or not identify or to transcend one's point of view if there's still a point of view?
So, question. You said a moment ago, my mind has a question. How do you know it was your mind? Where did this question come from?
Honestly, I have no clue. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we were sitting here speaking, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And right in the middle of the speaking, and the mind was empty, wasn't it? You weren't sitting and thinking about something, were you?
I was listening
when
to
we
you.
were speaking?
Yeah.
We were just, everything was quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden something came to you. And it probably was something like this. Wow, this is really exciting. So what's the next step? How does one actually, and then you assumed that came from the mind. So this is an answer to your question. You made an assumption, and based on an assumption, you said, my mind has a question. I would say that something else occurred. That while we were in the silence of whatever this is that was going on, it was a transmission, if you will, that while we were in a state of emptiness, something began to fill up our glasses. And what came to you is, can you speak about what's next? So how do we get there? You have to notice that part of the conditioning is giving credit to the mind when no credit is due. That there is a difference between internal conversation and something that just comes to you, but you don't know where it comes from. And that's why I asked, how do you know? And you said, well, I don't. Right, you don't, because it came to you rather than from you. What comes to us because it's looking for us. Why is it looking for us? Because it's providing us the sign that says, make a right here, go this way, speak with this person. And usually this doesn't come in words. It's just something that's clear. So in engineering terms, we would say, well, we have to reverse engineer it. Mm-hmm. We have to start going in reverse. So you first begin to notice that, wow, there's a part of me that every time something comes to me, I've been trained to say that came from my mind. Not so. Not so. You know, you asked a question, and then something started coming out of me. The people who are listening would say, wow, Simon asked this question, and then Jacob answered it. That means Simon gets credit for the question, Jacob gets credit for the answer. The question had nothing to do with Simon, and the answer had nothing to do with Jacob. The source came up with both the question and the answer. You had a question. from the beginning. You knew what that question was, but you didn't know from where the question came. You just knew, oh, Jacob and I are going to speak again. And all of a sudden, oh, that's it. I want to ask that.
It was like
But
that, yeah.
it was just like that.
It was, yeah.
And when it came to you, you got excited. Why? Because it was a surprise. The surprise isn't something you knew in advance. It's something that caught you off guard. It was a surprise. That's what life provides us, a continual surprise. So the question had you. You didn't have the question. You shared the question with me, and all of a sudden something started speaking. And you made an assumption. You assumed the question came from you and the answer came from me, and everyone that's listening had the same thing. Simon is a great interviewer. Jacob has all these interesting responses. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all virtual reality. I have no idea from where any of this occurs. And if you speak to a neuroscientist, they will tell you that none of us know what we're talking about. That none of us plan, even though we think we practice and we rehearse and we get the PowerPoint presentation. But when the real thing happens, something altogether different occurs. And it's not coming from us, it's coming through us. So that's what's real. But we've been trained to label it something different, which is not real. And we've been believing this. And so, you know, the greatest cause of disease is stress. What is stress? Stress is when you have an allergic reaction to something in life. Why do you have such an allergic reaction? Because reality and mentality are totally unrelated, and so they don't match up. There's dissonance rather than resonance. These things we're talking about, when I was a little boy, they would say, oh, she knows it by heart. That's what it means to know by heart. What we know by heart is truth. And it's not us that knows it. It just is. There isn't a knower of the truth. There's just the truth. And when it is flowing through effortlessly, it sets everything free, because it isn't a person speaking. It's something else that's beyond anyone speaking. What a nice conversation about something we had no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of stepping out of the catalog of life into life, being
right
with
catalog
all those
of
meanings
life.
and definitions and assumptions we have absorbed, and I don't know, might have come up ourselves. And then instead of living with life, we are living with the book, where we are kind of looking up what everything means and how things are defined to be, instead of
you know that
what actually is.
I'm sure that you have probably had the pleasure of interviewing famous people at different times. And when we think of someone who's famous, we say fame and fortune. You become a big shot and you become rich. Most of the people that I know personally who have achieved fame their fame is accompanied by misfortune. My mother used to say, be careful, you shouldn't become famous. Because when you become famous, your persona gets bigger, but often your humanity gets smaller. I have no interest in the persona whatsoever. Let the humanity grow like a big tree. Let us touch each other as just ordinary human beings. Nothing is more powerful than that.
And when you are inviting us to do that, do you have a recommendation of how to do that? Is that a
You see
contemplation?
how,
Is it
yeah,
a
how,
being with that question? Is it
yeah. You see how means what do I have to do?
yes.
But the reason we're called human beings, not human doings, is because there's nothing to do. Everything gets done by itself, just like the breathing, the heart pumping, the blood pressure, the hormone release. When you go to sleep, when you wake up, when you go to the bathroom, when you eat, when you pay your bills, all of these things, they just occur. They just occur. The how is notice. Just notice. You said before, well, how do you know that? You said my mind wants to know how, yeah. And then rather than answering the question, I asked you a question that brought you to that question, which is, are you sure that came from the mind? And all of a sudden, you realize that the question that began this conversation also didn't come from you. It came through you. It came to you as a gift. So how does it happen? You begin to notice the difference between what we have been told, what has been conditioned into us, and what's the truth. Like, for instance, every religion has something that they pray to. It could be something we would put the name God, whatever it is, and we think it looks like an old man with a white beard. What a silly idea. Or it's this, or it's this. And it's interesting that if you look at all the religions across the world, most of them have similar stories. Maybe it has a different name. Everyone believes this, but none of us were there. None of us know. How does one know? What I'm saying is belief is virtual. Trust what you know by heart. The mind does not know anything. It's like the mind is like a wonderful record collection. So you have the 1965 Abbey Road record of the Beatles or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you can remember all of the things in that library. So the mind is like a library of information. The library doesn't create anything. It just stores old information. What's the value of old information in a world that's constantly changing? If you approach a constantly changing world with an old set of eyes, you don't actually see what's there. That's truth. What you see is what you believe. There's an ancient Hebrew text called the Talmud, and the Talmud states, we do not see things as they are, we see them as we are. Awareness is curative. We begin to notice, and each time we notice something that's different, the noticing gets bigger and gets bigger, and awareness keeps expanding. And then all of a sudden, you're experiencing life through awareness, not through belief. Well, that was a nice chapter for today.
Yeah. I'm blank now. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you see, they say the truth shall set you free. That's what it means. You become blank. The key is to continue to notice truth. And then that continuously begins to create new state of blankness.
Yeah.
I think I have to get a pair of wings like you have behind you.
I'm happy to help with that one. Yeah. 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 Jacob, yeah, what a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your time, presence, the blankness which is coming through you.
You know, Simon, you know why we do this? Because this is fun.
It is.
This is exciting. This brings blankness. This silences everything. This is why it's so important for us to have these conversations. When I say us, I don't mean you and me. I mean all of humanity. This is where we realize that we're all coming from the same place. This is when we realize that we're all being nurtured from the same sources. That's the truth that sets us free. Less texting, less emails, more real conversation, real interaction. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Well, next time a great question comes to you again, you'll reach out again and we'll do it again.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Yeah, thank you so much, Jacob.
You're so welcome.
Has
it's a
been
pleasure.
Really a joy. And yeah, it brings one in touch with the mystery of life and our being. And yeah, I cannot imagine a more wonderful theme or topic for a conversation. So thank you very much for taking the time to being here and yeah, talking with us.
You know, life is a mystery. The whole thing is a mystery. What we're experiencing is virtual reality. The real excitement is the mystery. That's where you're falling in love every moment. So we're all doing our best to remember how that occurs. and no one's got it down perfectly. All of us are students. We just met on the same road on the way to school.
Yeah. The older I become, the more I realize how little I know, even though I very often forget what you shared before, that what I think I know is nothing else than beliefs or a library of information. Yeah, thank you again, Jacob. I wish you really all the best, and also to everybody who's listening and watching us, thank you so much for your time. Stay curious and see you soon. Thank you so much.